Good evening, everyone. My name is Carrie. I'm the Senior Organizing Manager with FVWA Washington, and we are so excited to have you here tonight to talk about FVWA Washington's strategy for this upcoming legislative session. Tonight with us, you will get to hear from our Political Director, Nilu Jenks, one of our coalition partners, Colin Cole from More Equitable Democracy, our Executive Director, Elise Orlick, and our organizer, Natalie. So you'll get to hear from all of us tonight. We're really excited to be with you. Just a couple of laying some ground rules. As usual, we are not going to have a chat, but we will have a Q&A. So any questions you have, please go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. We will either answer them loud, somebody will respond to you in the chat, one or the other as best we can. We're expecting a lot of folks tonight, so we might not be able to get all the questions, but please ask them. We're really excited to hear what's on your mind and how we can do this great work together. The first thing I'm going to do is hand it over to our Executive Director, Elise Orlick, to share a little bit about some updates in the ranked choice voting movement nationwide. So I'll pass it to Elise.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you everyone who's joining us tonight. In our November roadmap, when we spoke to you last, we had some initial results from RCV elections across the country. And we did have a very exciting moment when we learned during the webinar that Alaskan voters had opted to keep their ranked choice voting system with open primaries. That was close enough that there was a recount, but the recount showed even more support for keeping the ranked choice voting system with open primaries. Since that last webinar, we've seen a little more analysis coming out of the other elections, including Portland, Oregon, where they held their first election for city council using the new proportional ranked choice voting system. And the headline is, it lives up to all of our expectations of what a system like that should do. And there's tons of great data that's been published by the Sightline Institute, Fair Vote National, and others about how diverse this new city council is, how many voters are represented by their new elected officials. But one stat that's really stood out to me is that an overwhelming 91% of Portland voters said that the new system was easy to use and understand. And that really underlines what we saw in Alaska as well, that once people use ranked choice voting, they understand it and they like it and they want to keep doing that. There are also some recent successes here in Washington that we want to share with you. After all the votes have been counted, there are 39 new elected officials across our state who are prepared to champion ranked choice voting, including at least 6 new RCV champions in the state legislature. A lot of that thanks goes to our political director, Nilu, for creating these opportunities for more support for ranked choice voting among our elected officials. And we are going to reap the benefits of that during Lobby Day, which you're going to be hearing about later tonight. We also see more people working to bring ranked choice voting to Washington. So the Washington Democrats overwhelmingly voted to create a ranked choice voting system when nominating candidates to fill legislative district vacancies for the party. Those elections happened recently for 3 LDs where the representatives have been elected to higher office, creating a vacancy. All 3 of the districts chose to use ranked choice voting. Their elections went smoothly, and there's just overwhelming excitement that we're hearing from the party about that experience. And we think it's a great sign that more people are using ranked choice voting, having a good experience, and that's going to put a little more pressure on some important leaders in our state. Now, the future of ranked choice voting in Washington, with all of these recent successes, it's clear that our ranked choice voting is here. More people are using it, they are liking it, and they want it in more of their elections. The future of our democracy right now is laying with the states. So it's a really exciting time for me to be starting this job and for all of us to be working together to make Washington the strongest democracy in the United States, which I really think we can be. But as we all know, democracy is not a spectator sport. So it's heartening to see so many people here tonight who are ready to learn about our work, get engaged, and stay engaged. With that, a reminder that democracy is for everyone, no matter the color of your skin, your beliefs, the zip code you live in, or the amount of money in the bank account. Everyone's vote counts the same, and all of our voices deserve to be heard equally, and all of us deserve representation that actually represents us. At Fair Vote Washington, we envision a democracy that works for everyone, and we know that all of you do too. Our work is to bring bold, pragmatic, proven solutions here to Washington. And I want to thank you all again for investing your time with us tonight. I hope you'll continue to support us with your time, as well as your treasure and your talent. So tonight, if you're able to start a recurring monthly gift, even of $10, it can go a long way towards supporting the work that you're about to hear more about tonight. All right, thank you all for listening to me. I am going to hand it back over to Carrie, who's going to keep the program rolling.
Thank you so much, Elise. We're so excited about all of the good work that's been happening in Washington and nationwide. So with that, you all are here tonight because the Washington State Legislative session is starting in less than a month. And we know that it takes a lot of work and planning to get going. So you're here to hear about our bill, and you're here to hear about our multi-pronged legislative strategy. So to tell us about our bill, I first want to introduce you to Colin Cole. Colin Cole is the Director of Policy Outreach and Communications at More Equitable Democracy. His responsibilities include co-developing and advising on the creation of reform proposals, helping build coalitions led with traditionally underrepresented communities, and developing and maintaining relationships with strategic partners like Fair Vote Washington. Colin is also a co-founder of Fair Vote Washington and previously worked with grassroots lobbying on progressive tax reform for All In for Washington, in candidate campaigns for the Washington State Dems, and on the Bernie 2016 presidential campaign. We're so excited to have Colin with us tonight. You're also, of course, here to hear about our political strategy. It takes a lot of work to build coalitions again and build the support from legislators inside of the Washington State Senate and the Washington State House of Representatives. So I would like to bring on Nilu Jenks, our political director. As you know, Nilu is our political director. She's a dedicated community advocate who loves to engage with and serve her community. Nilu has been working with us for over a year now. And as a second generation Iranian American whose family was granted asylum in the United States, she is a strong believer in democracy and democratic reform. As a mother of two, Nilu became a strong fan of ranked choice voting through her work with climate advocacy groups. Thank you so much for being here, Nilu. And finally, I would like to bring on Natalie Morgan, aka the Morganizer, because you are also here tonight to hear about what you can do, and that is where Natalie comes in. Natalie grew up in a small town in Eastern Washington, Othello, and with a degree in sociology from Central Washington University, Natalie has pursued her passion to help people across a variety of careers, from nuclear power plants to international human rights organizations, and is glad to find herself here at Fair Vote Washington. When she's not working, you can find Natalie reading, jamming out on her saxophone, or being obsessed with her cat, Marcel. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you to everybody in the audience. There's 80 of you here right now, and the number keeps going up. I hope that gives you some excitement about how many people are excited about democracy. So first, Colin, what is the Washington Voices Act?
So for a long time, first of all, very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. For a long time, the Washington Voices Act was referred to as the Local Options Bill back in the late 2010s and early 2020s. So folks may have heard it referred to as that. But really, it is the bill that allows us in Washington to use ranked choice voting because state law as it exists today, not really because of ranked choice voting, but sort of incidentally makes using ranked choice voting really, really hard. So under state law today, because of 2006, essentially the state requires a top two primary to be held in almost all circumstances for all offices. And so, the two most common ways to use ranked choice voting, the way they use it in Minneapolis, in Portland, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in Oakland, California, in Portland, Maine, all over the country, is by combining the primary and general elections. But you can't do that if you have to have top two. Ranked choice voting doesn't work if you only have two options. The other common way that we see ranked choice voting used is by having a bigger primary, because again, you need more than two options. So having a primary that sends the top four through, like they have in Alaska, and the folks who came up with the top four model have recently, and by recently, I guess I mean for the last like 5 or 6 years, been recommending a top five primary instead, because that will get a wider range of views through to the general election. You might have two conservatives and two liberals, and then maybe one person either more in the middle or more on one of the extremes, whatever better represents the electorate. And so what the Washington Voices Act really does is clears those prohibitions and mandations of using top two so that we can use ranked choice voting, whether for our city councils, for our county commissions, for our school boards. And the other big thing that it does is it sets up a work group for members from the Secretary of State, from elections administrators, from folks who are experts in ranked choice voting, to come up with model rules and procedures and practices for what doing a ranked choice voting election should actually look like.
Amazing. Now, so I guess I want to go backtrack on myself a little bit and just say, if it wasn't obvious, we are running the Washington Voices Act this year. That is the bill we have chosen to run. I don't think I said that explicitly. So Colin, thank you for telling us about the history of it. Now, with a little bit more background and context to it, can you tell us, A, why this is such an exciting bill? And can you tell us why it's so exciting that we have the opportunity to pass it this year?
Yeah, happy to do so. So I guess also should have called out that voices is not just a nice thing. We want to promote more voices in Washington, but it's also an acronym. It stands for Voting Options, Implementation, Compliance, Education, and Standards, which is a bit of a mouthful, so that's why an acronym is good. But it really does all of those things. So number one, it gives us more voting options. It lets us use ranked choice voting in top 5 open primaries, or it lets us use proportional ranked choice voting. It gives guidance on what implementation has to look like so that the jurisdiction isn't out there on their own having to figure it out, and you don't have Seattle coming up with different rules than Vancouver, coming up with different rules than Spokane, coming up with different rules than Bellingham. So it helps make sure that it's uniform. That's the standards part at the end. It also mandates education so that we have to make sure that all of our jurisdictions that are choosing to use ranked choice voting are teaching it in a way that follows proven best practices learned from around the country. And the part in the middle, I've been going out and in, compliance is a part that's really near and dear to my heart. In my day job, I am the director of policy outreach and communications at a racial justice nonprofit called More Equitable Democracy. And that's relevant because our work on racial justice is really relevant to the C of the Washington Voices Act, which is compliance with the Washington Voting Rights Act. The Washington Voting Rights Act of 2018 has been recently confirmed by the state Supreme Court to allow ranked choice voting and proportional ranked choice voting as remedies to violations under the Washington Voting Rights Act, which means if a jurisdiction is sued or wants to proactively make changes to their election system because it might be disenfranchising a protected class, the state Supreme Court believes ranked choice voting should be one of the options on the table to solve that problem. And without the Washington Voices Act, that basically means the courts are going to have to decide what does ranked choice voting look like in Vancouver or Bellingham or Spokane or Yakima County. And each court would have to do that on their own. They wouldn't have legislative guidance. They wouldn't have best practices. They would just have to kind of figure it out, a judge, a plaintiff, and a defendant. And so what the Washington Voices Act does, and this is what's really exciting to me, is it creates not just a uniform standard, but a pathway so that jurisdictions don't have to have these long, protracted lawsuits that go 2 years through the courts, and instead can just get to the business of enfranchising voters.
That sounds pretty exciting to me. Thank you so much, Colin. I'm going to come back to you.
Sure.
All right. So, as we know, passing a bill is not something that just happens in a silo. We don't put it in the hopper and then walk away. We work really hard every day to move it through. Nilu, as our political director, you are responsible for building the political power to carry our bills through. Could you tell us a little bit about how you do that with coalition work, which coalitions we're working with and why? Yeah, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I want to say hi to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It is your presence that really makes all this work possible, because if the people don't want it, then, it doesn't happen. But I can see that people want it, and I'm hearing it more and more every day. And we hear it in our coalitions as well. So the main coalitions we're working with in supporting our bill and our work is Washington for Equitable Representation. It is a coalition built around proportional representation and getting, racial justice as well. So we had a great presentation along with them, and they were in Bellingham recently to work on educating communities. So there's that component of making sure education's happening. But they also show up with us and do testimonies and reach out to legislators and let us use their logo, because people know that there are many orgs behind a logo, and that's pretty significant. Another one is the Washington Voting Justice Coalition. I'm really excited to share they were one of their priority bills this year, which means that we're really getting quite a lot of support on their website. They're sharing action items like our lobby day, and help us with op-eds and all kinds of great things. And again, that logo that represents all the orgs that are members of that coalition. And there's a new democracy coalition coming together. It's really just a place where people can find out where all these democracy bills are happening. I'm really excited for that one as a place for people just to find out what bills they can support. But that's just a little bit of insight into something that's happening. But overall, we can share resources, keep each other informed, go to one meeting and find out what everybody's saying, what our talking points are, make sure there isn't confusion around what's happening, and also organize our testimonies and op-eds together for bills that we're supporting together. So it's a little bit of a long answer for coalition, but it's a fun thing to do, to be in community, really.
It's not a long answer. It was perfect. I think coalition work is so exciting because all the time as an organizer, when we're out talking to people, we hear, why don't we just work together? Why don't we just work together? And we do. And we do work together, and we do our best to bring as many people together and also give back to them and their work and their causes. So thank you, Nilu, for all the work that you do to keep us in political community that way. You mentioned this a little bit. You talked about testimony. Can you tell us a little bit about testimonies and how they're so important to, reminding the legislators about, hey, we're here. And they're always around their own people all day long, hearing about different priorities from different people. And how do testimonies advance our work in the space that they come?
Yeah, so for example, last year there was some conversation around non-native English speakers having a hard time doing ranked choice voting. And so we brought in partners that were willing to testify and speak to that reality, that are, represent communities of color and non-native English speakers, and say, actually, we want this. This works. We need education from our state. And so that testimony will happen in committees. So different legislators or different parts of different communities, both in our House and our Senate. So just like the US Congress, we have a House and Senate in the state as well. And so testimony happens there as bills are presented. And it's very exciting to get your bill in front of a committee. That doesn't always happen. And we were very fortunate to happen that last year, and organizing coalition members to be partners in your time to speak, in front of everyone. A little nerve-wracking, but also really important.
Completely nerve-wracking. It's recorded and
Okay.
broadcast and
Yeah, no big deal, right? But it's really fun. And just, for all of you watching, you can sign in pro. Actually, anybody can really come in and provide testimony, but it's nice to organize that testimony, to have kind of strategy built around it, which is exciting. It's a little bit strategy if you're into chess or something like that. It's kind of how I like to think of it. But you watching can also sign in pro. That's something that is available online now. Any bills that you like, you can go in and say pro or con. You should all know that that's available to you as citizens of the state.
Absolutely. It's a really impactful way to make your voice heard from home. My next question is a little bit harder, maybe, and maybe you're so prepared it's not hard, but you, as our political director, Nilu, are responsible for finding our way around roadblocks as they arise during session. Obviously, we don't know what those roadblocks are going to be, when they're going to pop up, or what it's going to take to tackle them. So it's really quite a simple job, you might say. Could you tell us a little bit about what tactics we come prepared with to help us maneuver those roadblocks when they show up?
I think what I like to have in my backpack is friends and people that we built those relationships with, just in a wide swath of relationships. Last year, another conversation was around people with intellectual disabilities finding challenge using ranked choice voting and working with Disability Rights Washington. It's kind of the same answer, really, but having them come speak, or we have some studies at the Evans School that are happening. More Equitable Democracy also has one to study WVRA, Washington Voting Rights Act violations. Sorry for the acronyms. Legislative district, LD is legislative district. Somebody commented that in the chat. But really, for me, it's just being responsive to what we're hearing and having people telling us what they're hearing too. You'll never know what the hurdle is going to be or who's going to bring it, or you find out a legislator is actually not supportive in the background, and finding someone who has a relationship with them and maybe can craft a conversation with them. Or also there are things that are good. Well, I don't want to use the word good, but like a party lockout happened in Kitsap County, and making sure there are op-eds around that and sharing that with the legislators really in that district, so they know the impacts of having a top two and having a split vote in their own communities. Doesn't have to be negative hurdles. Sometimes I guess those are springs. But just being prepared for what shows up and being ready to use them. You're muted. I'm sure you're saying all good things.
I say only nice things. No, thank you for letting me know. No, thank you so much for building those friendships and having them on call. As soon as you said backpack, I had an insight to Inside Out 2. For those of you who have seen it, there's a fanny pack that has surprise helpers, and so maybe you are our fanny pack, Nilu, with surprise helpers ready to come get it done.
I mean, wasn't that like Dora the Explorer too? You never know what you need, and we need a little song of whatever comes singing out of the bag.
Probably.
Yeah.
I love that. How can we as constituents support the political process during the legislative session? How can we support you?
There's so many things. There's the signing in pro, reaching out to your legislators, really even to your city council, and making sure they know what you're thinking about. One thing that was exciting to me is our new representative, partially who came from Olympia, said to me that she went out to our Secretary of State, who has some concerns around the implementation of ranked choice voting, and said, look, we're going to implement this in Olympia. People keep writing and they want it, and I want support from the state. So if your city council members eventually become legislators, they have great avenue there, but they don't know if you haven't written them. And because this is a local options bill, as well as Colin explained, really think about everyone that represents you and let them know how you feel, because sometimes they say, I haven't heard from anyone. And that's something you can do. Op-eds are awesome. They're just wonderful to educate the community, and also they get seen by a lot of people, including representatives. Showing up to these kind of things in numbers and lobby day to keep us happy and energized, and all that, and sharing articles, opportunities to be educated, speak about ranked choice voting. That actually makes a lot of difference. And, you know, I have to give a shout out to Elise. Contributions help too, had to be said. So those are some of the things that you can do. And if you ever have ideas of things, reach out. We're happy to hear. And like I said, in Bellingham, volunteers is this great educational opportunity there. And those are things that I know Carrie and Natalie are happy to support.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you truly for all of the work that you're doing. I personally feel extremely excited about this legislative session. And it's not because it's more than the fact that we have an awesome organizing program going on. So, Natalie, you and I are responsible for engaging all of the amazing people who are here with us tonight and all of the amazing people who are not here with us tonight. You have been hard at work for quite a while now, boosting our numbers for Lobby Day. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with volunteers and why?
Yeah, I was just thinking about talking about nerve-wracking. This is also being recorded and everything. So, oh my gosh. Yeah, no. So with volunteers, I wrote a little something down. I said, we've been organizing to make sure everyone has an opportunity to participate in the movement. And what that's meant in the reality of it in these past few weeks is making phone calls. I have been so incredibly lucky to have such great volunteers joining me multiple times a week to call all across the state to make sure that we have the support we need, going into our lobby day, Wednesday, February 5th. That's not the first time you'll hear that date. And yeah, not the first, or not the last, not the first. You get what I mean. So, we've made over the past few weeks hundreds of calls to legislative districts all over the state. We have a goal of 37 legislative districts being represented in person in Olympia on Lobby Day. That's 3/4 of the legislative districts. So we've been calling into them one by one. And I like to think that some of you are actually here because you got a phone call from one of us. Maybe me, maybe one of our other incredible volunteers. So that's a large part of the outreach we've been doing because we know newsletters are amazing. Carrie writes some great stuff. Of course, we all know that. But people come for the cause, stay for the community. And it's nice to put, a face, a friendly voice, all of these incredible people to get to know them actually personally and get a phone call. So I was going to say, if you get a 509 phone call, that's probably me. 509-989-4286. Save it in your phone so you know it's not spam. It's Natalie. So yeah, shout out to the volunteers that have been helping too, that are in this meeting as well. You know who you are and you're the best.
I'm gonna write this down as a slogan. It's not spam. It's Natalie. So,
it's me. Yeah.
Amazing. As you are making these calls and inviting people into the space, what actions are you asking folks to participate in?
Yeah, so I guess I sort of mentioned that already, asking them to attend webinars like this one, like some of y'all are here because you got personally asked. You were brave enough to answer the phone. Of course, big one being come to Lobby Day, Wednesday, February 5th, so we can have as big of a turnout as possible, and also to join me to do some phone banking. That's, it can be intimidating. We talk about that, but honestly, the experience that I have had and the volunteers who keep coming back really has been very pleasant. You get to talk to people like me, talk to people like Carrie, talk to all the folks that care about electoral reform. What an incredible niche group of people that really care about making the world a better place. And I would say I'm also asking folks to think about, how they can bring this into their own communities, do some what we call relational organizing, people in your life that are democracy dreamers, that want to strengthen our democracy. Keep them in mind, keep them included, send them my way. I am so very happy to talk to folks from all over the state about ways that we can be successful, not just here in Lobby Day and through this legislative session, but as this process continues down the road.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be excited to hear more from you in a minute. But the next piece of sort of the legislative puzzle pie that we don't have somebody necessarily here to speak about it explicitly tonight is lobbying. Fairfield, Washington does work with a lobbyist. His name is Craig Engelking. He's fabulous. I'm just going to call him best in the biz. You can quote me on that, but If you don't agree, then that's okay. But lobbying often gets kind of a bad rap because of how it shows up in Washington, D.C. But here in Washington State, and the work that our lobbyist does is to coordinate within the legislature to help communicate between legislators, to help them understand what different pieces of the puzzle they can move to reach their various goals and not have to sacrifice things that matter to them. So we're really excited and proud to be able to work with people like Craig. Because of Neelu's work with the Washington Voting Justice Coalition and Washington for Equitable Representation, we also have 2 more lobbyists who are going to be working on our behalf to move this bill forward. So while we are working with all of you, we have people who are working on the inside as well. Our work is to help you get on the inside as well. So we are all working together to move these bills forward. So we're really excited about that. And I also want to talk a little bit about what success is going to look like from all of these corners, because, we have a lot of goals, we have a lot of ambitions, but, what does success look like? And Nilo, I think I want to go to you first. Like, what does success look like for, let's say, a day of testimonies?
Well, last year I got a lot of texts saying those were great, so that would feel good to me. And I heard some legislators liked it, and it passed out of committee afterwards, which, we got our bill the furthest it had gone last year, and I think those had an impact. So for me, first it would be people saying yes, and then organizing a strategy, showing up, delivering those, and hearing positive feedback afterwards, and then really moving through committee. You can't beat that. I mean,
That's true. That seems like that seems like a success. And we also know, I mean, whether or not the outcome of whatever happens during testimonies and the bill hearing, we're now on record talking about all the amazing things about ranked choice voting. That's recorded in Washington legislative history. And so it's a really cool way to make history. I'd like to talk a little bit about Lobby Day and why that's such an exciting part of the legislative strategy. And there's a story we like to tell from Fair Vote Washington about how one of our consultants had a meeting with a legislator to sit down and talk about ranked choice voting and how great it is. And the first question the legislator has was, who wants this? Who's actually asking for this? Which was a really blunt but important question. And we know that all of you here tonight are the people who are asking for it. And so Lobby Day is just this enormous resounding yes that we want this bill. It's a resounding yes that it's not just corners of the state, it's people from all over this enormous, beautiful state of Washington who want ranked choice voting. We represent various types of communities, identities, and we are here to say, no, together we want this. And if you aren't sure if your story is the right one, it is. Your story is the right one. We want you there. Your legislators need to hear from you. Your legislators want to hear from you. So that's a really important piece of it. Colin, would you like to add anything about what success means for the bill from a policy end?
I guess there's a few different things. Number one is just sort of going through the process. So, ultimately, like the biggest success is it being passed into law. But there's a bunch of steps you have to go through first to get there. It's going to be introduced in committee, the policy committee it's called, which deals with the subject area, which is the State Government and Tribal Relations Committee on the House side. And then it has to have a hearing and be passed out of that committee. Then it has to go to the Appropriations Committee that says this bill is worth the small amount of money that we think it's going to cost. And that's a big committee. It's got about a third of the State House of Representatives sits on that committee. And so it takes a significant show of support to get through there. And then from there, it's eligible to be considered on the floor of the House. And so each of these are successes, but also even just the initial sponsorship list for the bill, it can be a mark of success. Sometimes it depends on how much gumshoeing we're able to do to go out there and knock the doors. But in the past, we've had about in fact, a third of the state legislature, over half of the House Democratic Caucus and a couple Republicans co-sponsor the bill, which is a big mark of support behind it that you can just see immediately when looking at the bill. Oh, everybody's names are on this. And so early on, a really, really, really big thing folks can do, even before we have a bill, is just reaching out to your legislators and asking your friends and family to do the same and telling them, hey, keep an eye out for this bill. Representative Mia Gregerson is going to be introducing it. It's been in the House before. You've probably co-sponsored it before. Will you co-sponsor it again, or will you co-sponsor it for the first time? Just so that we have that big list of folks who support the bill.
That's incredible. I love that. I want to move on to some of these amazing questions that we're getting in the chat, because we have a lot of them. Some of them are comments, and so we might not address those out loud. We have a question from Wendy Williams. She's asking if we have any idea how our Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, who is famously anti-ranked choice voting, feels about the Washington Voices Act. And I will open that up by saying he still doesn't like it. Nilo, I know you've been working in this space, so I'll kick it to you first.
Yeah, no, he has concerns about accessibility for non-native English speakers, as well as those with intellectual disabilities. And the way to address that is through education and working on access. And those are things that we're thinking about a lot. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to be supporting the Meaningful Language Access Bill that's coming out of Latino Community Fund that One America is supporting, that reduces the threshold for translation on the voters pamphlet and just providing information about candidates to people. I don't think that things being hard is the reason not to do them. I think we work on how to make it accessible. So really working to build up a strategy around improving access to reduce those concerns. And one thing I'm thinking about too is how do we make friends with the Secretary of State. I'm not here to make enemies. It's just not my style. And there are bills that he is interested in, and if there are ones that we can support, as opposed to ones that are intended to make our job more difficult, I'm happy to support them. There are really important ones that he has asked to happen that we're exploring supporting too. So, he's our Secretary of State. I would love to work with him as much as we can and address his concerns as we can too.
Absolutely. Education is the E in our act, and we mean it in lots of different ways. So I think we all look forward to working alongside him as much as possible to make elections as robust and safe and representative in our state.
To throw one thing more out there, ranked voting is coming with the Washington Voting Rights Act. I mean, that's what the MED is doing the study with the Evans School. I mean, it is coming, and we need standards. It's partially just accepting where we're at. So that's another part of the strategy for this year too, is just, do you want chaos? Because I don't love chaos. I like, my straight lines. And so that's something to think about.
Thank you so much. It's so true. So true. We have an amazing volunteer up north named Sharon Abreu, and Sharon says that she is lucky to have all three of her state legislators support ranked choice voting. In that case, Sharon wants to know, what can she do to help move things forward? And Natalie, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would like to say that's very nice. That sounds like really nice to have some legislators in support. But that certainly doesn't mean there, isn't a lot still that you can help out with, starting with, helping make sure that those legislators are champions of ranked choice voting, like really making sure they know that you support it, that folks in your community support it, and that they're really being behind this cause. And also certainly can help me out all across the state by recruiting in other legislative districts that are not so lucky, that there are still some other legislators whose minds are not totally made up about this. And you can help, get us the support in those legislative districts so those legislators can then become also champions for ranked choice voting. So that's my answer.
Incredible. Colin, can I hear from you as well?
Yeah. So I think lifting up that number one, you can exactly what Natalie just said. You can email legislators outside of your district, and sometimes it's relevant because if you're emailing them in their capacity as a member of the party leadership or as a member of the state appropriations committee, even though they're not your representative from your district, they are a part of a system that your district has to go through. And so it's totally not at all weird for you to message other representatives as long as you don't lie and say that you live in their district. If you say, I don't actually live in your district, but this is an issue that's really important to me, then that's really great. The other thing I'd want to lift up though is that you can ask those supporters from your LD to personally reach out to their colleagues. It's one thing for, a skeptical legislator from, East Pierce County to hear from me or Nilu about, why this is such a good thing. But it's very different to hear from their colleague, Senator Sharon Shoemake from a swing district up near rural Whatcom County about why it's important to her constituents. And I think you'll find that often legislators talking to other legislators about bills is actually really rare. It almost never happens. And so even when legislators are strongly supportive of a bill, they kind of just assume that, organizations like Fair Vote Washington and the WER Coalition are out there doing all of that work. But it is an area where we need a lot of help. And so that would be my ask to the legislators from the 42nd is, will you not just sponsor this bill and not just put your hand up in the committee to say that you would support it, but will you personally reach out to your colleagues on the House Appropriations Committee, on the State Government Committee, and ask them to support it and tell them it's a priority to you and to your constituents? And if the legislators are talking to are skeptical, ask them why. And don't just say, all right, I don't want to rock the boat, Hank. But instead say, well, Hank, this is really important to me. Because legislators are on a first name basis with each other. How can I convince you to support this? What are your hangups? Because oftentimes what we found most of the time when people say that they don't support ranked choice voting, it's due to misinformation. It's due to thinking that it's something that it isn't, or that it works a way that it doesn't, or that something is true which isn't. And once we're able to learn what folks' hangups are, usually if they're willing to hear information that they didn't know before, it's very possible to change folks' mind, but we have to have that conversation first. And legislators have much better access to other legislators than any of us ever will.
That's so true. And for Hank's knowledge, the boat has already been rocked. So we're trying to steady it over here. But thank you so much for that. So I'm just going to summarize that. Still reach out to your reps, still come to lobby day, still bring a lot of people with you because your own representatives can and should become champions. Encourage your legislators to speak to their peers. Have Sharon Shoemake talk to Hank because Hank needs to hear from Sharon. And thirdly, make sure that you're helping bring in people from around the state to lobby day. Make sure that people in districts that aren't yours know about this. We have lots of phone lists. We would like help calling them. So thank you all so much for all those answers. We've gotten a couple questions about what the issues were last year and or in just in previous sessions in general, and how we are taking a fresh approach, or if we're taking a fresh approach to our strategy this year. And Neil, if you're ready for that question, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, so one of the things last year was, for example, Representative Ramos, who is moving into the Senate, was like, what kind of ranked choice voting? Not that there's a lot of kinds, but somebody asked in the questions, well, what about RCV, ranked choice voting, in the primaries and the general? And one of the things we're looking this year to change is actually, let's clear up that part. We have the top two, do top five, make it just say that in the Washington Voices Act, and have the ranking in the general, like just cleaning it up for some of the questions they asked. Or, this year we're a Washington Voting Justice Coalition priority bill. That was something that I really tried to make happen, I'm very happy about. And so those are things that I think are important, and continued education in the community, and really lifting up disability rights and access. That's something we've worked on this past year too. One thing I'll add to the last question that's relevant is just that idea of chaos is building, right? The people want it, like, do you really want to deal with not having standards here, there, and everywhere? And finally, just the party lockout. We nearly had a party lockout in our Commissioner of Public Lands race, which was a statewide race. That I think rattled a lot of people and brought more people into our movement. But we did have a party lockout in Kitsap County. And so I think people are starting to realize, hey, with top 2, this might be nice actually to have ranked choice voting and expand to top 5. So just using, like I said, the positives, not always hurdles things is part of what we're going to be. Hope to make a difference. Last year we made it to rules. Rules is a hard place to land. You don't always know what happened. But we can get out of there this year.
And I want to chime in with something that maybe feels so obvious because it was your job, but we endorsed candidates this year and we brought in more champions. So that's immediately something we've done differently. Having real political power that we have backed, that have told us that that they're going to back us, and we have an accountability measure in the legislature now, is an entirely different lever to pull. So Neil, I want to just lift you up for all the work that you've done to create a different dynamic for us, even just walking in the door. So thank you for that. And this is our second annual lobby day, so it's not going to feel a lot different, but it's different in the way that it's consistent. This is going to be one of the first times we're going to have some consistency in repeated demonstration of our people power. So that is in and of itself is different. The committees have all been shuffled. We have a new chair in the House Government and Tribal Relations Committee. It's Charlotte Mena. She's historically been extremely supportive of ranked choice voting. So we don't have a barrier in our own committee in the same way we have in previous years. So politics is a long game and it won't necessarily look radically different from year to year, but we are going to play the cards we've been dealt as best we can, and we're going to shuffle the deck as best we can to give ourselves an outcome that we want. So those maybe felt too obvious for you, sorry, because it's what you deal, it's the water you swim in every day. There was a question in the chat asking if the bill has been introduced yet. We do not have a bill number yet. We will be so excited to tell you when we do, so don't worry. We will be hounding you because we're going to want your support from the start. There's also this great question about wanting to know what Bob Ferguson's record on ranked choice voting is. And Colin, Nilu, do you have anything you can share with us?
He's never formally taken a position on the issue. He has signaled before support for the Washington Voting Rights Act. He supported, his office supported both the bill itself and then also an expansion of that bill a few years ago. I will say that I've heard him say, like, just offhand at a small 50-person gathering or whatever, that he thinks it's a good thing. But ranked choice voting, but never more than that. But I do think we have a potential advocate there.
Feel free to write him.
Right.
It's so true.
I will say one other thing that I think folks should keep in mind as well when it comes to persuading folks about ranked choice voting. There's a lot of reasons to like it, whether or not, whether you want to see more people have their voices count, whether you want to see less toxic and divisive campaigns, whether you want to see more people from more walks of life have representation, whether that's conservatives in progressive areas or progressives in rural areas, people of color in predominantly white areas, like whatever. It's good for it all. But the other key thing, and Nilu mentioned this already about how ranked choice voting is coming. Ranked choice voting is coming. It doesn't matter if you as a state legislator personally don't like it and you personally think it's not a good idea. It's happening. Seattle is moving to ranked choice voting. Other jurisdictions like Yakima County have already requested ranked choice voting through the Washington Voting Rights Act. And it's only a matter of time before more places start using it. So at this point, the question isn't, do you support RCV or not? The question is, when RCV inevitably happens in Washington state, starting as soon as a couple of years from now, do you want there to be statewide guidance and statewide standards and rules and procedures to make sure that everyone's playing by the same rules? Or do you want each city and town and county to be off on their own in the Wild West, coming up with their own rules and procedures? And if I were someone who didn't like ranked choice voting, I personally would be much more in favor of regulating it at the state level rather than just letting it go off on its own. So I think there's a genuinely strong argument for even opponents of RCV to support this bill.
Absolutely, especially because it's still optional. It's voting options. The second letter of the entire bill. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I'm gonna see if we can find one more question to answer because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But there's sort of a question, I'm not gonna say it verbatim, but I'm gonna summarize it and ask it in a way that I think will still be helpful, which is that if you are meeting with a legislator, you have a legislator who isn't supportive of this bill or isn't supportive of ranked choice voting, why is it still so critical to reach out to them? And Colin, you just answered it a little bit, but I want to answer it again with that framing. Why is it still so important to reach out to the people who maybe aren't supportive of it? Colin, I'll just kick it back to you to sort of iterate yourself.
Right. So I think in terms of the importance, I think a big part of it is just demystifying and untangling some of these things. I think a lot of legislators still have this conception that, oh, like this is the RCV bill. This is going to be the bill that makes ranked choice voting happen. If I put my name on this, it means I support RCV. That is a perception that sitting incumbent legislators have of the bill, and that's not true. And so giving them a chance to learn that by hearing from us is really, really important. And whether that's emphasizing the fact that it's already happening, that it's an optional bill, it just enables jurisdictions to choose to use it in a more streamlined fashion rather than going through a court process or doing a complicated on their own thing. All of these things are details that your average legislator who's only really looked at the bill for 2 seconds, said, oh, it's RCV, I don't care, and then moved on, don't know. And so it's important for us to educate our legislators about it. And that's really sort of what the fundamental aspect of citizen lobbying here is it's not just advocating for the thing, but it's educating our elected officials on the thing that they haven't spent enough time on.
Thank you.
Add to that, there is also the component of asking them why they feel the way they do. And I love it. Sometimes we have emails forwarded from you all or just information passed on that this legislator said this or this city council member said this. That's extremely helpful because it helps me understand the landscape of what I'm facing. And also, like, it's good to know why people feel like just lean in with curiosity. They're people and they love hearing from you, and you are their constituent and they're looking to serve you. So having that conversation matters in a two-way direction. And, taking the opportunity to share your why. They may not have heard your why. Like one that's really brewing for me right now is the reduction of political violence that we can see with proportional representation, for example. They may not have heard that before. Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez just introduced a bill around studying that into US Congress. So just think of it as a two-way street that you also share with me.
Always CCing you, Lou, on this conversation. I also want to add from an organizing perspective, we often talk about like building our base, right? And we want to move some things through. Your priority are the people who are going to move it through for you, who are going to run the ball. But neutralizing your opposition is also a really critical piece of this. And having those conversations, getting curious with your legislators can help them go from a no to a I'm not going to get in your way anymore, or even I'm not going to get in your way to a yes. It's rare to see the no to yes, but if we can inch people forward and out, neutralize the opposition, that's also a really important thing. So coming and talking to your legislators, no matter what, no matter where they are, is hugely critical. Thank you all so much for this conversation. I am so excited for 2025 legislative session. It's a really big year in a million different ways politically, but I know that we have an incredible team here assembled between our supporters and our staff and all of the lobbyists and contractors we work with. So I'm personally super excited. And as we are wrapping up, I'd love to hear from all of you, why you're so excited about moving our bill forward this year, and a call to action you can pass on. So Colin, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I think my big call to action is really just to not just reach out to your legislators, but to kind of hound them a little bit. Not necessarily following them around the state, but like when you go through the Washington State Legislative website and check the box to send your legislators an email, there's a box you can check that says like response requested, and basically when you check that, it highlights it as a priority for them, and I think they're actually, if not required, like strongly encouraged by state law to actually respond to all of those things. So do that so that they're not just seeing the email, but they're actually responding to it. But don't just send the email. I know in this day and age, we really hate live communication, but calling and leaving a message or speaking to a staffer and saying something's important to you is really great. And you can ask for follow-up too and say, hey, Sarah, who's the legislative aide for so-and-so, I'm just calling to see again if legislator so-and-so has had a chance to look at the Washington Voices Act yet. It's really important to me. Do you know how they feel about it? Do you know when I could call back to hear if you've had a chance to speak with them? And really encourage that follow-up, because that's, I think, where folks, legislators in particular, are going to feel like they're being held accountable. It's not just saying yes or no in an email, but it's actually having to get back to you when you reach out to them.
Thank you so much. Nilu, what is a political call to action we can respond to?
When we ask for the signing in for pro, or if there's a time when we say, hey, send in these scripts, show up for lobby, there are things that you can do to apply pressure that are significant and are related to what Colin is saying, and we'll give that direction and support as much as we can. And also tell your friends, like, multiply your impact and multiply them in districts where we're having a harder time, or where, I don't know, in the 46th, Senator Valdez is head of that committee now, and it's really important for him to hear from you. So like thinking about the committees and where people are, and if you need help with that, we're very happy to guide.
Incredible. Yes, get your friends involved. Talk to these chairs. And Natalie, what is something that people can do to support field efforts?
Yeah. Well, say it with me. Come to Lobby Day. And when is it? Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. That's a huge part of it. Join me for phone banking starting in January, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 4 to 5:30. It's a great time. And, read these emails we put out. Gives me a lot of anxiety to put them out there. So I hope you read them and get something out of them. And at any point, reach out. Say you want to get involved. We're here to help you get involved with something you care about. So see you Wednesday, February 5th.
Thank you. And I want to pull Elise, our executive director, on for any last calls to action you want to offer.
Yeah, so that's a great list of ways to get involved. And I just want to throw in one last reminder that another way to support our work year round is to become a donor to Fair Vote Washington. We listed those 3 T's at the beginning of the webinar: your time, your talent, and your treasure. All of those are really important ways that you can get involved to support this movement. Every dollar will go to support the work that you've heard our team describe here tonight, from coalition building, pounding on doors in the legislature, and working to bring on more volunteers and supporters like you. You can support either our C3 or our C4 to support those different types of work. If you go to fairvotewa.org, I see the link is in the chat. You can set up a recurring gift of $10 or any amount that you're able to give. Again, it all goes a long way to support this team right here.
Thank you all so much for sharing your talent and your time with us tonight. We really appreciate you. I'm so proud to work with this team, and we will see you in the new year, and we'll see you on February 5th. Have a really safe holiday season, everyone. Take care.